Imagine a world where your every move is tracked, your every thought analyzed, and your every secret known. In this brave new world, privacy is a relic of the past. Your smart devices, once loyal companions, have become silent sentinels, reporting your activities to unseen masters. Your refrigerator knows your dietary habits better than you do. Your fitness tracker monitors not only your steps, but your stress levels, sleep patterns, and even your mood swings. Social media platforms, once windows to connect with friends, have morphed into all-seeing eyes, their algorithms not just predicting your behavior with unsettling accuracy, but steering it through highly targeted ads and posts designed to manipulate you. Your digital footprint is no longer just a trail, it's a complete, high-resolution map of your entire life. In the streets, face recognition cameras track your every movement, linking your physical presence to your online persona. Your car's GPS doesn't just guide you, it reports on you. Even in the sanctuary of your own home, smart speakers hang onto your every word, parsing your conversations for valuable data and allowing governments and corporations to spy on your most intimate moments whenever they please. In this world, your data isn't just a commodity, it's currency, power, and control. Corporations know your desires before you do. Governments anticipate your actions before you make them. The line between targeted advertising and thought manipulation blurs into obscurity. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a far-off future. This is now. What do you think about when I say privacy and security? I think about locked doors, I think about 1984, the book, I think about conspiracy theorists, perhaps you do too, or perhaps other ideas come to mind. In this episode of Cast of All Trades, I'm going to explain the importance on privacy and security in our modern era by discussing the effects of losing privacy and security, the biggest offenders, how we can take back our information, and much more. My name is Orion Siebert, and I hope you enjoy. I want to begin this episode by talking about how we are currently watched and surveilled today. Our surveillance, especially in the US and in much of the West, is much more subtle than China's CCP, but it's just as effective. For some examples, smart devices listening to our conversations. There have been a number of legal cases where employees of many of these companies were listening in onto many of these conversations, or looking through cameras, listening into conversations, or other situations. In fact, there is a new term that's been going around called love-int. Perhaps not a new term, but it's a term that many of us haven't heard of before, where this is a term created because corrupt employees and government officials have been given backdoors or given access to many of the apps and smart devices that we willingly place into our homes or place on our phones, where they can tap into them to see our conversations, to use their cameras to spy on people. And I would call this love-int, where they would spy on potential romantic interests, or not even potential romantic interests, just people that they thought, ooh, that person's attractive. I want to spy on them and see what they're doing. There have been a number of legal cases on this, including one prominent one from Snapchat, where there was a police officer blackmailing women for using Snapchat pictures that they thought, oh, these were deleted. Why do you have access to them? And that turned into a big legal case. Aside from that, every message you send, every search you make, everything is data being harvested and sold by major corporations to other major corporations and governments, if not being directly accessed by said government, such as in Australia, requiring local companies to grant them backdoor access to their users' encrypted messages. When you have an encrypted message, the idea of it is that the company doesn't have access to it. Only you and the person you're sending it to should have access to that message. Australia said, no, we don't like that. We want to be able to look at everything that our citizens are talking about so that we can crack down on them. That's something that you would expect the CCP in China to do. That's something that you would expect North Korea to do. It's not something many of us would expect Australia, Canada, the UK, the US to do. These are supposed to be the bastions of freedom, and yet, look at this one example. They're saying, oh, you're not allowed to have privacy. You're not allowed to hide anything from us. If you're doing anything, if you're communing, if you're talking about anything bad behind our backs, we're going to know and we want to know. There have been reports of agents sitting on social media flagging people who have the quote-unquote wrong opinion so they can censor those people or censor those conversations later. Check the Twitter files for more information on that. These people also have private access to your direct messages. So, once again, people in major government positions are able to look at anyone's messages. On top of that, your phone, your car, your computer, and more all track your location, your contacts, your messages, your emails, your calls, your address, your purchases, and more, and are willing to not only track and store this information, but sell it to anyone who is willing to purchase it. We often willingly or unknowingly hand over most of our intimate details of our lives to governments and major corporations, which could one day be used against you or leaked to some shady part of the dark web. I could go on, but in summary, every action, transaction, and interaction you make is seen, stored, and sold to someone. There are many major consequences that this could have on us as individuals. I'm going to look at two of these major consequences of the loss of privacy at this scale. There's the risk of freedom, and there's a psychological impact. Many people might think, wait a second, how does a loss of privacy risk our freedoms? For some examples, many people might trust our governments currently. I've mentioned that the US, that many of the countries in the West are seen as bastions of freedom and liberty, yet many other countries were seen as big bastions of freedom, of liberty, of something good for their people, and yet these places will shift overnight. Power shifts, but data lasts forever. Shifts in power, having a loss of privacy instantly shifts power away from individuals and more towards companies and major corporations and governments, because they have all of our information, and yet we have very little information about these people, about these companies, about these governments. And as I just mentioned, data lasts forever. However, regimes and social norms may change. Laws can easily change overnight, such as the rise of the Berlin Wall overnight. And in a more closer to home example is some states in the US will have changed their laws on abortion overnight, and suddenly women who were normal citizens became criminals overnight. So, data lasts forever, but regimes and social norms may change. Even if a government doesn't change, intense surveillance on a populace gives the government a sort of stranglehold over their citizens. Think North Korea and China. If they can see everything that you're doing, they have some power over you. When we lack privacy and security, governments can more easily steal their citizens' money with the click of a button, freeze bank accounts for legally protesting against the quote-unquote wrong thing. They can allow or disallow certain privileges based on things that you do or don't do. All examples from supposedly free countries. The Canada trucker protest, for example. Look at what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, where many doctors, professors, and many other professions were either fired, lost their licenses, or shamed out of existence, and more, just because they disagreed with the narrative provided by the press. And when all is said and done, and we learned much more about what was going on, there's still a bunch of conflicting information in a lot of the cases where professors, doctors, and other professions were fired or lost their licenses or shamed out of existence. These people happen to be right in a lot of cases. Moving on to more of the psychological impact, I've already touched on a little bit of it, but your data can and is used to manipulate you into taking specific actions and making certain decisions, even if you don't recognize it. Targeted marketing campaigns, for example, ideological manipulation, and more. There's a reason that you often feel angrier once you get on social media. You're often angrier when you leave it than when you first get on there, because social media is designed to get you to use it more and more and more. It's not designed for you to be happy. The best way that social media can drive engagement is to rage you, to make you angry. It'll show you posts, it'll show you different advertising campaigns that are designed to make you want to click more, to want to engage more on there, to spend more time on it. You don't get that if you feel good afterwards, because you'll say, I went on social media, I went on Facebook today, I saw some great posts, and I hopped off in about 5 minutes. No, they don't want that. They want you to hop on Facebook, they want you to see a mix of, this is fun, this is good, and this is rage-inducing. I want to combat this, I want to fight this, I want to contribute, I want to engage with this thing, to prove that to them that this person's wrong. And suddenly that 5 minutes that you had allotted to spending time on Facebook has devolved into an hour and a half of you on some internet argument that ultimately means nothing. Another example of this is, remember the case where Target was sued over promoting baby products to a teenager? And there's a reason for this, because they knew she was pregnant before she did. That's the power of big data, that through so much data manipulation and data collection, many of these major corporations and governments are able to predict things about us faster than we can predict them about ourselves, even things going on within our own bodies. It's amazing what they can do, and it's terrifying all at the same time. Another impact of having our constant surveillance and constant breach of privacy and security is there's an intense sense of paranoia over constant surveillance of who's watching at any given point in time. Perhaps even for people who don't immediately recognize that this is happening. Many people can say that there's some sort of latent paranoia, some sort of idea of, am I being watched over this? Or they'll have some lingering tingling on the back of their neck saying, is this going to impact me in some way? And in doing so, that leads to the next point of stifling of free speech. When you're being watched, and what you say could have a major impact on how people view you negatively, or may have an impact on your well-being, you're more likely to be self-censoring. You're more likely to hold off on saying something that you believe to be true, or something that might really need to be said, just because it's an opinion or something that goes against the grain, that governments, social norms, or just people in general would say, that's not something that you should say, that's not an idea that you should have, therefore we should crush you for having this idea. There's something about privacy and knowing that I can say something privately that allows people to speak more true, that allows people to go out into the world and say things and do things and contribute to things that they believe should be contributed to. Once again, because data is forever, your past can and will often come back to haunt you. We've seen this so often with big celebrities, where they'll have something that they did when they were 15 to 18 years old, and suddenly years later they'll get dragged through the mud because of something they did as a dumb kid. Same thing for some politicians or other people who are going up or rising the ranks to combat a currently standing power. People will go through everything. They'll comb through this person's entire life with a fine-tooth comb to find something to bash them about. And if something doesn't exist, they can go through and say, I'm going to make something up to bash this person. Although that's less about privacy and security, but more about how our power structure is currently based. But going back on this, because data is forever, your past can and will come back to haunt you. This will also lead to greater closed-mindedness, greater unwillingness to change, greater willingness to go along with the status quo due to fears of repercussions. Because if you're willing to just go along the status quo, if you're willing to be the sheep that follows the shepherd no matter where they take you, you're going to live a pretty good life. At the same time, you're going to live a fairly repressed life as well. Also, another sort of social psychological impact is that we're more likely to curate the person that we show online, often placing that image above who we really are, where there'll be a big discrepancy between this is who I present myself as online versus who I really am. And that does not only will it provide more data for major corporations, it'll tell them this is who this person wants to become, this is who this person wants to be, so this is how we're going to treat them. We're going to tell them, oh, if you want to be this fake persona that you present yourself as online, all you have to do is buy this program, all you have to do is get this product, all you have to do is XYZ thing. There's so much mental manipulation, so much psychological impact that comes from breaches in our privacy and security. I could go into even more depth, but we would spend hours and hours and hours on this. This is all just the tip of the iceberg. So I've mentioned major corporations and governments, but who specifically are the biggest offenders of privacy and security? Starting off with our big friend Google. For anyone who uses a Gmail, congratulations. They read your Gmail, they read your Google Drive, they look at your Google Photos, they view your search history, and much more. And once again, they take this information, they store it, they train their models on it, they train all of their algorithms using it, they sell this data, they give this data straight to the government, they do everything, they do anything they want with this data. And guess what? You willingly hand all of that over because you say, I want to use a free email account. Sure. Google sounds good. I use them for searching stuff. What you don't realize is how much information you're willingly giving them and what that information can be used for. Amazon, they know your shopping habits. They know your address. They know everything you've ever purchased, through Amazon at least. They're also, the Amazon Web Services powers about 30% of the web through their servers. So anything that goes on those servers, I'm pretty sure that they know what's going on there. So there's a good chance that a number of the websites that you visit that perhaps you don't want other people knowing about, well, Amazon will know about that. Also, thinking about Amazon Alexa or Amazon smart devices, they can listen in to your every conversation, and there have been cases, as I mentioned earlier, with LoveInt, where people can listen in, where either corrupt employees or government officials or just anyone can listen in to people's conversations going on over these smart devices. In a similar vein, you have Microsoft, very similar to Google in how they do their data collection. Social media, whole big handbasket of just here's our free data and we're willing to give it to you just because we want to see what's going on with our uncle who we've never talked to, who's been estranged to us since 2016. There's so much data collection happening on social media, I feel like I don't have to go too in-depth on that. There's also financial institutions with KYC. They want to know every single transaction you ever make. Every time you use your debit card, your credit card, you make a bank transfer, all of it. Financial institutions will track that information and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Hospitals track your health information, and while they do a very good job, usually, of not giving that information out for free, they will often still sell that information to some people. And also their hospitals are known for having very bad security measures and very easy to hack into for some people. So a lot of hospital information will be leaked onto the dark web relatively easily. Phone providers, some of the worst when it comes to your data privacy and protection. There's actually a number of laws that state that they cannot make their communication that they offer secure and private for their users. Because, for those of you who don't know, phone calls and text messages, SMS is what it's called, is probably some of the least secure communication tools or data transferring tools there are out there. And yet, for some reason, governments say, oh, actually, you cannot make this private or secure. It has to be on this open channel that basically anyone can tap into very easily. So phone providers, some of the worst, and that's not even including cellular plans, being able to track your location through cell tower triangulation, so much more there. Data brokers, I think that goes without saying. These people are literally in the business of buying and selling your data. Governments, as I've already mentioned, a number of them have implemented backdoors or have sued or vied for backdoors into a number of these different corporations, if not worked openly with a number of these corporations to get your data into their hands so they can spy on each and every one of their citizens. Finally, we are our own greatest offenders for allowing all this to happen and often encouraging it. For example, nearly 1/3 of Gen Z and about 20% of 30 to 40-year-olds support the government installing surveillance cameras in every household to quote-unquote prevent crime and abuse. But also watch every move, every intimate conversation, every intimate moment, every private moment that you would not want anyone to look out for. They will be watching that. Just like how the government in Greater Oceania in 1984 watches their citizens through the telescreens in every room in every home. It amazes me how open and how willing so many people are to just hand over their information or hand over their privacy to many of these places. But I can also at the same time understand why to some extent, because of the way that it's marketed, the way that it's presented. Because governments and corporations have collected so much data on us already, they know how to manipulate us. They know how to frame things to say, actually, you want this. This is a good thing for you. We're doing this to help you. Even though in reality, it's done very little to help us at all. A number of these cases or a number of these tools that governments will use are put into legislature. And that's what I want to cover a little bit of what is some of the government regulations that they have put into place for the express purpose of spying on their citizens. I'm not going to go too in-depth on what each of these different pieces of legislature allow the governments to do, but it's a good opportunity for you to go and research and see for yourself what is it that each of these pieces of law allow the government to do to spy on us. So not in any particular order, here's a list of some of the laws put into place that allow various governments around the world to spy on us. You have the U.S. Patriot Act. You have PRISM, which gives the U.S. government direct access to servers of major corporations with lots of your data all about you. You have the Tempest program. You have the Turbulence program. You have the Turmoil program. You have the UK GCHQ Tempora program, collecting data on all information entering and leaving the UK's servers. You have census data. You have KYC, know your customer information used by financial institutions. There are a number of required government backdoors, such as what Australia tried to do with getting access to encrypted messages. This is just the start of programs that we know about. Imagine how many programs we don't know about of what these countries or governments and corporations are doing to spy on us. It amazes me. Before we go further, I want to take a moment to share why I personally care about online privacy and security. I've already touched on a few of these bits and pieces throughout this, but I just want to be more explicit about why I personally care about it. A world without privacy to me is a world that is less secure for the individual. By having privacy, we can express ourselves without fear of financial or reputational repercussions. Privacy gives power back to the individual and takes it away from governments and corporations who want to use that information that we might have to sort of lord that over us. And it's not as difficult as many people might think. There are many measures that you can take to scrub as much of your information from the web as possible and maintain layers of privacy and security while still enjoying a high quality of life on the internet, if not improving your quality of life in many ways, such as fewer ads, less time spent online, more critical thinking for yourself to actually create your own thoughts and opinions about things instead of having your own thoughts and opinions stuffed down and being replaced by whatever media places in front of you. Also, what does online privacy and security have to do with generalism and jack of all trades? This is Cast of All Trades, where I talk about developing skills, exploring ideas, and following curiosity. So why am I talking about this on this show? Because this falls under exploring ideas and following curiosity. By living a lifestyle that is more private and secure, you become more resilient to persuasion, because you'll see fewer ads and less targeted information, for one. It's also a good opportunity for you to learn new skills, such as learning new programs, learning how different businesses make money, and so much more. I could go into more in depth of how this applies to generalism and jack of all trades, but that's just tip of the iceberg there, not really what this episode is about. One thing I will touch on is I want to face some of the arguments of why people might say, oh, this is all conspiracy theory bunk, you don't have to do this, you don't have to worry about your privacy and security, feel free to just give your information over to governments, to corporations, and whatever. So what are some of the main arguments that I might face or that people might face for trying to live a more private and secure lifestyle? One of the biggest and quickest arguments that people will put out there is nothing to hide, nothing to fear. Okay, then, if you have nothing to hide, give me your credit card information. Give me your bank account information. Give me your social security number. Let me see everything you've ever bought. Let's see your search history. Show me all of that, and then we'll see what you think. No takers? Great. Clearly, you have stuff that you want to hide. Even if you have nothing to fear, as I've said before, your data is forever, but regimes come and go and social norms change. So maybe for now you have nothing to fear, but who knows, down the line you might. Another common argument, especially one used by governments, is that this is for your safety, not for control. See China, North Korea, Nigeria, Canada, Australia, so much more. As I just said, governments change, social norms change. Something that's fine today can quite easily become illegal overnight. As I just said before, Berlin Wall, abortion laws changing to turn many women from law-abiding citizens into criminals. Protesters in Hong Kong, who were legally protesting, suddenly became criminals overnight, and because they weren't able to use private and secure communication tools, a lot of them became criminals very quickly. Also, even if you have a well-trusting government, you have rogue actors and employees. See the Love Int stuff from earlier, where NSA workers are spying on romantic interests, police officers doing blackmail using Snapchat, so much more. Finally, to argue the whole mass surveillance is good for your security front, mass surveillance has done little to nothing to prevent crimes or attacks. While the numbers are a little fuzzy on this, most sources agree that mass surveillance has been a net negative for people. So, yeah. Finally, the last major argument that I want to tackle is that people will say, oh, privacy is dead, there's nothing you can do. Trust me, there is plenty you can do. This is just defeatist mentality. People don't want to put in the effort, and trust me, it's not all that much effort. So let me tell you what you can do. But before that, if you found this episode to be educational, interesting, or eye-opening, and you want more, subscribe so you don't miss out. Alright, back to the episode. In this section, I want to talk about a range of tools for removing your data, altering the programs that you might use to protect your data while still enjoying the wonders of the internet in the digital age, and some general principles you can follow to boost your privacy, security, and anonymity from day to day. Starting out with removing your data, there's a couple ways you can do this. First off, I'm going to go with probably the easiest and just best way to go for this. There are two main websites or two main companies that are very good at doing this. That's their entire shtick. These companies are Delete Me and Incogni. Essentially what you'll do is you have to have some level of trust, and from what I've seen and from all the reports I've seen about these two companies, generally people do trust them to remove people's data without sharing the data that we willingly give them. So, Delete Me and Incogni. what these companies do is that you'll provide them with some base layer of information about you. That will probably be email, phone number, address, a couple other things that they keep encrypted, that they keep stored safely on their servers in such a way that even if they get hacked, this information is not going to be leaked out somewhere super easily. Then they can go on your behalf to data brokers, to other sources all over the web, including the dark web, to try to get your data removed from there, so that you don't have to go through all the effort of trying to track down all of your information on your own. Another good thing that you can do to start removing your data is just to go through every service that you use. This is something that I did somewhat recently, where I created my own little spreadsheet where I tracked every website that I used, every email that I used for those websites, and essentially just made a massive list of in how many places have I given out my phone number, my email, my address, my bank account information, all of this stuff, just to see where everything is. Then if you want to do it more manually, you can then go through that list and start deleting those accounts that you don't need anymore. So that's just the basics of removing your data. There's certainly a number of other ways that you can go about it, but that's all I'll touch on for now. Now for the real big stuff here. How can you actually live a more private and secure lifestyle online? For this, I'm going to be discussing various tools, programs, and softwares that you can use across your computer, your desktop or laptop, and your phone to change up your lifestyle just a little bit to get a better overall experience online while still protecting and securing your information and having some level of anonymity. Let's start with your computer or your desktop. So most people will use either Windows or macOS. If you're looking at just a simple base layer of which one is more private and secure, I would instantly say macOS is much more secure. Maybe private to some extent, but certainly not the best. If you want the best, I would say switching to Linux. There are many different operating systems of Linux that people call distros. There's a number of different options. It can be very confusing for someone new stepping into the Linux interface. But to make it simple, I have two recommendations if you're looking to switch to Linux, to an operating system that doesn't collect a bunch of information on you, that isn't trying to pump your computer full of data tracking stuff, that doesn't come full of bloatware, that might even make your computer run better in some cases. So these are two Linux distros / Linux operating systems I would recommend for people to try out to see, is this something I would want to use long term? Since for the most part, most of us just use our computers as web surfing tools. We use it to log on, go to Google Chrome, which we'll talk about switching from that later. We use it not for the actual applications that we might download, but for the web as a whole. And even for many of the applications that you would download and use on your computer, they're often Linux versions or Linux alternatives that work just as well. So for Linux, I would recommend people take a look at Linux Mint or Pop! OS. These are two different Linux distros, or for the most part, people consider it different operating systems. Kind of, it's a little complex. But needless to say, simple way to put it is I would consider looking at downloading something like Linux Mint or Pop! OS and installing it on your computer over your current operating system. This will totally wipe your computer and start it fresh with this new version of Linux on there. But what makes this so great is that Linux is not targeted for many trackers. There aren't many things that actively target Linux-based computers because, one, not as many people will use it because it's out of the norm. You don't usually just buy a Linux computer online and then it just comes pre-installed with Linux on there. People usually have to put in some effort to get it installed. So that's why it's less targeted for things like ads and for trackers and for hacks, stuff like that. At the same time, it provides an extra layer of privacy and security because it doesn't have all these trackers and all these things on there by default. Whereas Windows is renowned for all of its data tracking and all of its updates and pushing so many things on its users that they just don't want. macOS is better than Windows, but it's also just a step behind Linux. So if you're already in the Apple ecosystem, I would probably recommend staying with macOS. But if you're on Windows and looking to make a change, go to Linux. I would recommend Linux Mint. It's probably the most Windows user friendly from there. Next, I want to touch on web surfing. There's many different things that we can do for web surfing, and there are many different topics here I want to touch on, such as the browser you use, the search engine, VPNs, cookies, and password managers. So starting with the browser that you use. Most people are going to use either Safari or Google Chrome. Both of these are horrible when it comes to protecting your privacy and security. Switching browsers is surprisingly simple though. The one I would most recommend is switching to the Brave browser. It's basically the same thing as Google Chrome, but it has an ad blocker built in, and it doesn't track you. It's amazing. It's really great. I use it day to day. I have gotten so much time back from not having to watch ads for stuff. A similar browser that you might want to look at, if you're more of a Firefox fan, is look at the Mullvad browser. It's basically Firefox, but very similar to Brave, and that has a built-in ad blocker, a couple other fake features in there, doesn't track you, all that stuff. It's great. Finally, one that I don't know if I would recommend for most people, but it's certainly an option, one to use for just basic web surfing, is the Tor browser. Now, you may have heard of the Tor browser as being something that people use to get to the dark web, and oh, it's sketchy and dark. It's really not. It's just another way to browse the web that adds an extra layer of anonymity. It's maybe a little slower and not recommended for most people. And certainly if you're using it, just use it for browsing. Never log into something through the Tor browser unless you're going to only use it through Tor. But for the most part, if you want to keep it simple, just look at the Brave browser and the Mullvad browser. Next, if you want to switch search engines, stop searching things on Google. There are many better ways to get information aside from just using Google search, and many other ways that you can search without giving your information over to Google or to other corporations. There's a number of different search engines that work great, and some of them even have access to Google's servers and Google's information, where you can get all that information without giving out your own stuff. So starting with what I use Brave Search because it's built into the Brave browser. It works really well. Again, they don't track you, they don't sell your information, none of that. Some other options are DuckDuckGo. You have Search, like Searching, except it's spelled SEARXNG, which is okay. And then one that I would highly recommend for many people who want to use Google and want to get those results, but don't want to hand over their information to Google, is to use StartPage, where you can essentially craft your own search engine from there, where you can have access to all the different search engines and be able to use all their information without handing over your information to them. So my recommended of what I use is I use Brave Search, but a close second would be DuckDuckGo, and finally would be StartPage. Next, moving on to VPNs. This is essentially a way to hide what you're doing from your internet service provider, because again, they're also able to get access to everything you do online. If you do something via your internet, they can see it. But what VPNs do is all that your internet service provider will see is that you're logging on and you're hopping over to your VPN's servers, and then you do all of your searching through there. So your internet service provider can't see what's going on there, and there's a good level of trust between users and VPNs, where these are companies that are essentially giving users access to their servers, and they have most VPNs have a good track record. And I'm going to list the 3 that I would recommend that probably have the best track record from what I've seen. So there's Mullvad VPN, which is the same people that made the Mullvad browser. They do a great job. They have a number of different payment options. So if you don't want to even, if you want to buy a VPN or I guess subscribe to a VPN without your financial institutions knowing that you're subscribing to it, Mullvad VPN has a number of options allowing you to do that. You have Proton VPN. You're going to hear the word Proton a lot through this because they make a lot of great services and a lot of great programs for private and secure individuals. They have a free VPN option where you can connect to servers in the US, the Netherlands, and Japan, I believe. They may have added one more server in there. It might have been Belgium or Germany, but generally they're good. What helps is that Proton is a Switzerland-based company, which has some of the best privacy laws in the world. So a company based out of there can do some great things for you if you want to maintain an extra level of privacy and security. Last one I'll recommend that I personally haven't used, but I've heard a lot of great things about the company, is Calyx, where Calyx has a number of different operating systems and a number of different tools for private and secure people. They work great in the US, but they have a free VPN called Calyx VPN, which I have not personally used it, but is one that I'm going to look a bit more into. So for VPNs, I would recommend, if you're on a budget, I would definitely look at Proton VPN, their free version. If you have a bit more money to spend on a continuous basis, it's still really cheap. Look at getting Mullvad VPN. Next, for cookies. This is something that you typically access on most websites, where perhaps you have a pop-up on a website to say, do you agree to all of our terms and conditions when you use this website? Or, hey, activate these cookies so you'll get the best user experience for these websites. You'll usually get those pop-ups on a lot of different sites. Just decline or disable all the cookies that you're handed that they say, hey, we want to track your information to make your search experience better. Just don't. Just really don't. Go through all those checkboxes, make sure they say declined or don't, and at the bottom, just say, yep, save and submit. And if they don't give you that option, then usually they'll give you a decline option, or you can still use the website without doing anything with that. So yeah, generally, just a good rule of thumb, disable and decline all cookies. Finally, password managers. We all know how difficult it is to memorize tons and tons and tons of passwords. That's where password managers come in. These are software where you can essentially store all of your passwords in one place. You can have a bunch of very secure passwords, and then all you have to do is remember one master password to get access to all of your accounts. That's the quickest and simplest way I can put that. There are two main password managers I would recommend. Number one, considered the best password managers by security personnel, by basically anyone in the tech space, is Bitwarden. It's a free password manager that you can use. Super simple to set up. I personally use it. I think it's great. So yeah, I would highly recommend Bitwarden. As a close second, believe it or not, ProtonPass. Again, Proton, you're going to hear that a lot today. They have a whole suite of private and secure tools. Their password manager, ProtonPass, I've heard great things from it, and that's all I really have to say about it. Both of these are free to use, so yeah, I would recommend Bitwarden first, but if you're already in the Proton suite, or if you're going to switch over to the Proton suite, I would recommend ProtonPass, just because it's nice to have everything in one place. Next, your internet plan. As I mentioned before, your internet service provider is going to see everything you do. So if you're going to have a VPN as a good layer above that to protect you from sharing your internet, from sharing your whatever you're doing on the internet with your internet service provider. But there's also another step or another thing that you can do to help block out some more stuff that your internet service provider might see. There are two main options. I'm going to mention stuff in the US because that's what I know, but outside the US there are probably similar options as well. So for a potential alternate internet plan, there's the Calyx Institute Membership Mobile Router Internet. So this is another thing that Calyx offers. As I mentioned before from their VPN, Calyx has their VPN plan, but they also have this membership mobile router internet thing where they have a special, because they're a nonprofit, they have a special thing that they can do where they can provide their members with a router that they can take anywhere that actually has a different internet band compared to most traditional standard routers, where most standard routers have to deal with the commercial space, where you have to deal with internet, you have to deal with a bunch of internet traffic going in and out through this one set band. The routers that you can get through the Calyx Institute and the internet that you can get through them is through an educational band, so there's much less traffic going through there, and you can often get better speeds through it. And also, because this is a nonprofit based on privacy and security, they're well trusted, and you can generally stay safe, private, and secure through using this Calyx Institute mobile router system. From what I've seen, it seems to be about the same price, if not a little bit more, than most standard internet plans, but a benefit of it is that you have a router that you can take anywhere with you. If you're going on vacation and you want to have your router with you, great, you can just throw it in a bag and take it with you. It's pretty great. Next is a little fun project that I would recommend for the more tinkery type of people, but you can take a Raspberry Pi computer. It's a little credit card sized computer, and you can actually hook it up to a router and install a program called Pi-hole on there, which is an ad blocker and it does a bunch of other things. If you want more, just look into that on your own time. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it could be a great tool for privacy and security. It's not that much of an investment. Great tool. I would highly recommend it. Next, moving on to communication. This is going to cover email, messaging, conference calls, social media, and then I'll touch a bit on some other stuff, but communication first. For email, stop using Gmail, stop using Outlook, stop using Yahoo, stop using all of that. There's a number of different email providers that are built on privacy and security that are, yes, they are free, like a number of them are free, and they still do a great job. So, first and foremost, is going to be ProtonMail, another Proton tool. I use ProtonMail for most of my stuff, except for when I have to use Gmail or other tools. What makes ProtonMail so nice is that they have an option for you to import all of your contacts, all of your messages, everything from Gmail to ProtonMail. And once again, because they're based out of Switzerland, you have more privacy and security protection acts where most people cannot just get direct access to your email. Even Proton cannot get access to your email. So that instantly cuts out a bunch of the data collection that Google, that Yahoo, that Outlook, that so many other companies that have your email would already get access to. Another option is Tuda, previously known as Tutanota. I haven't used them, but I've heard great stuff about them. Then a couple other options that I want to touch on is these are for more aliasing, where perhaps you might want to have a couple other emails so you're not just giving one core email out to everyone. So if one email gets compromised, then great, I have to switch over to a totally new email. Something that you can do instead is you can sign up for Simple Login or Addy.io. for free and get access to a bunch of disposable/alias emails, where say you want to get a newsletter regularly, but you don't want to give them your core email so that you don't get a bunch of spam through that. You can sign up to Simple Login or Addy.io with your core email, and then through that you can get a bunch of disposable alias emails that you can then give out to a bunch of other services or a bunch of other places. So you can still get access to those emails, but then if that email happens to get leaked out somewhere and you start getting a bunch of advertisements or a bunch of other things that you don't want, you can shut down that disposable or alias email, never get anything from that again. Simple, easy as that. When it comes to email, the final thing I'll touch on is an email client. This is essentially a separate app on your computer, sort of like the Outlook app, where if you can, on that, you can sign in through your Outlook email and see all of your emails there. You get a couple extra features. You can essentially get that, but a more private, secure version. And for desktop/laptops, I would recommend using Thunderbird, made by Mozilla, the same people who make Firefox, which on its own is also a pretty good browser. But back to communication stuff. I use Thunderbird. It's just a good way to store, to have all of my emails together in one place. Works well, I recommend it. Next, moving on to messaging. Stop using Facebook Messenger. Stop using all these social media messaging apps where you can. I'll touch on some of this again later, but there are 3 messaging tools I'll recommend here, but there are many more that you can go and look at. But the 3 main messaging tools I'll recommend for your desktop/laptop will be Signal, Briar, and Matrix. Signal for sure is number 1. Think of it like a better, more encrypted phone number that you can use. That said, you do need a phone number to sign up for it, but once you do that, it's smooth sailing from there. Briar and Matrix, while I don't personally have experience using them, I've seen a lot of great things and heard a lot of great things from people who do use them. So, moving on to conference calls, mostly replacing Zoom. Zoom is another tool that uses a lot of data breaches and privacy infringement stuff. Yeah. But we can easily replace Zoom with something that I personally find to be much better, and both of these are free tools, so yeah. Jitsi is what I personally use. That said, there are some pros and cons to Jitsi. One, you do need to link an account to Jitsi, which isn't great, especially since the accounts you might need to link. I'm pretty sure their options currently are Gmail, or a Microsoft Outlook account, or a GitHub account, which GitHub would probably be the best or most private of the bunch, but even so, not all that great. Unless you're doing a self-hosted version, which is great about Jitsi, because it's a free and open source software. You can actually host it on your own computer, or you can host it on your own server, where you can make the rules there. So everything will then happen on your own system, and you don't give any information out to anyone else, which is great. Also for Jitsi, other people don't need a Jitsi account to actually use it. If you make a Jitsi account or a dedicated account just for Jitsi, then you can send out links to join the conference call that you're hosting. They don't need any accounts to hop in or do anything with it. So it actually makes it easier to use than Zoom in some ways. But if you do want something much more similar to Zoom, where people do need accounts for it, then I would recommend signing up for Jammy. I've used it a little bit, but I've had better experience with Jitsi. Next, social media. Oh boy, social media. Most social media platforms are horrible for privacy. If you want to keep using some of the mainstream platforms, just limit what you post and be mindful of what you do post. And if you can, don't use your real information where you don't have to. For example, don't put your address on social media. Don't put your phone number on social media. It's stuff like that you might think, oh, there's no harm in it. Like, it's asking for your information of what state are you in? What city do you live in? But you'd be surprised how easy it is to reverse search where you might live and to find your people's address through their social media accounts. Just keep it as minimal as possible. That said, if you do want replacements, there are actually a number of different open source or federated social media platforms, where these are platforms that are designed to be more private and secure, more less data harvesting styled stuff. For those, I'm just going to keep it short because they're okay. For a Facebook replacement, you have Diaspora or Minds. For a Twitter replacement, you have Mastodon or Blue Sky. For an Instagram replacement, you have PixelFed. For a Reddit replacement, you have Lemmy. For more, I would just recommend looking for federated social media platforms. That's just the best way I can put it. Finally, moving on to a bunch of the other category of other tools that you might want for your desktop/laptop computer. For calendar, you can replace Google Calendar with Proton Calendar. surprise, Proton comes up again. They're basically the ultimate switch over from Google if you want to go, if you want a quick switch from Google to a privacy security suite, just go from Google to Proton. For private file storage, you can go from Google Drive to Proton Drive, surprise, or you can do self-hosting with Nextcloud. A little more complicated, I'll probably recommend someone just go with Proton Drive. Next, for file sharing, you can use Proton Drive, or you can go with like Onion Share or SyncThing. Onion Share allows you to essentially temporarily put a file up on like a dedicated Tor network server, something like that, where it's private. You can give the password to one other person. You can even set it to be a one-time use. So it's sort of like a burning password where they use it, they download the thing, and then once they do that, it's done. The file gets removed and it's shared, it's done. You don't have to worry about it. Very simple, very easy to do. For word processing, Microsoft Office, you'd be surprised how much information that Microsoft gets off of the whole Microsoft Office suite. Even if you turn on all their privacy and security settings, they send so much information back to Microsoft, even if you use it offline. What it'll actually do is it'll store all the information it's going to send off to Microsoft, and then wait till you're online again to send all that information off. So yeah, there are two main replacements for Microsoft Office I would highly recommend that I personally find better. You have LibreOffice, which I use for most of my word processing stuff, or OnlyOffice. So yeah, that's what I would highly recommend for that. For knowledge management / file management, I know a lot of people use Notion, which is fine, tends to work pretty well for them. I prefer Obsidian, pretty good. It's a good way of storing a bunch of information and connecting ideas together. For finance, I know I'm blitzing through a lot of this, but there's a lot that I want to go through. So if you want, you can go back through and try to listen again to see which of these would I recommend. For finance, there's no real mainstream tool that people will use to, for online shopping. So this is one that can very easily protect and sort of hide your credit card information online. And that is called privacy.com, or I call it privacy cards, where essentially you can hook up your your bank information to that website. And once again, this website is very well trusted in the privacy and security community. What you can do is then you can use you can get a set of credit cards from them, or of limited time cards, where you can sign up to things, or you can make purchases with them. And then you can actually get fake purchase information sent back to your financial institutions. So if you are buying something that you don't want anyone to know about, then you can say, hey, I want this purchase to look like I'm buying a skateboard instead of buying who knows what. So yeah, that's a very good tool. I like it. It works pretty well for me. Finally, there is crypto. Crypto is kind of complicated if you want to get into this space. I know a lot of people are not in the space or doing the whole crypto thing. But if you do want to do crypto, here is my general setup for someone interested in looking into it. Use Kraken as a on-ramp. Essentially what an on-ramp means is that you can take your money from your bank account and get it onto a crypto institution, or get it onto a crypto exchange. Use Kraken for that. Then you can use Bisq, a private peer-to-peer exchange network. You do need a little bit of Bitcoin to start on that. Or you can use StealthX, one that I personally like, which is a private peer-to-peer exchange. Essentially what that means is that you don't have to go through any centralized, anything that's super highly tracked to actually start buying and selling and trading crypto. But at the same time, to use those properly, you want to go with something like Monero, which is a private cryptocurrency that does not track who has what or who is making purchases with what. So yeah, people often say that Bitcoin is private. It is not. Everything is open on a ledger for anyone to see. So generally, people like to use Bitcoin or Monero for stuff. Monero is the privacy coin of choice for most people. But back to actually using crypto stuff. For storing crypto, for a online private wallet, I would recommend Exodus, or using Cake Wallet on your phone for more easy day-to-day use. And for a hardware wallet, for something for long-term storage, I would look at a Trezor wallet. Finally, for actually using crypto in your day-to-day life, I would recommend looking at coin cards to convert crypto into gift cards that you can use in most places. You can actually get some pretty good deals on it as well. Finally, looking at some specific coins that I would recommend people look at for use in privacy and security stuff, for actually buying and selling and treating it like a currency. Bitcoin is kind of the gold standard of crypto. Monero, as I said, is good for private transactions and generally my go-to if I'm going to try to buy, sell, do stuff with cryptocurrency and treat it as a currency. Finally, there's Litecoin, which if Bitcoin is gold, then Litecoin is sort of the silver of the crypto world. That was one big brain dump, and that was all just for your main computer. Next, I want to move on to phones, because, oh boy, phones are so much more privacy invasive than our computers, our main computers ever really were. It all starts with the type of phone that you're actually going to buy. For the worst privacy and security experience, get a basic Android phone, because they're going to, Google or Amazon or whoever is going to track you to high hell. For a slightly better improved privacy experience, go to iPhone. They have a better privacy and security policy than basic Android, but it's not amazing. For the best experience, you're going to want to go with a Google Pixel, specifically for the reason that you can install custom ROMs of Android on there designed to be private and secure, which is kind of ironic that Google surprisingly is the most private and secure hardware, but the least private and secure software. So anyways, with that in mind, I'm going to go a bit more in depth on why this is the case. That's mostly due to the operating system on your phone. You have much less options of operating systems when it comes to phones compared to desktop or laptops. With basic Android, that is the operating system that you have access to. For the most part, most phones can only run basic Android, and it is, as I mentioned before, very bad for privacy and security purposes. Very open, very liberating, you're able to do a lot on Android, and I love Android for that reason. But at the same time, for basic Android, it is going to do a lot of tracking, a lot of privacy infringement stuff on there. For iPhone OS, they do a pretty good job, as I mentioned. It's basically the same thing that I've been talking about. Apple is generally better than Google, than most other companies when it comes to privacy and security of their users. Overall, they do a pretty good job, but it could always be better. If you're already in the Apple ecosystem, I would recommend just sticking with the Apple ecosystem. It's probably just the best one and done that you can get with it. But if you want to take privacy into your own hands, then I would really recommend going with a custom Android ROM, where there's essentially a way for you to install a new operating system over your current Android operating system on your device. That said, it's limited what devices this actually can work for, which makes it ironic that Google devices are probably the best when it comes to installing these custom private ROMs on their devices. So for that, there are 3 main custom Android ROMs that you would probably want to look at for privacy and security sake on your phone. Those would be Calyx OS, which is developed by the Calyx Institute, the people that I mentioned before who have Calyx VPN and their special mobile internet router thing. They make a great operating system for phones for privacy and security purposes. Kind of the gold standard of Android custom ROM privacy and security is Graphene OS. There's mixed thoughts and mixed emotions about the developer of it, so I'll push that to the side, and I prefer Calyx OS over that. Then finally, a more general purpose privacy and security Android ROM is Lineage OS, which does work across a wider range of Android products. But at the same time, it's a little bit less secure than Calyx or Graphene, but it's not all that different. If you already have a certain Android device, just check Lineage OS, see if it supports it or not, and maybe go with that. Next is your phone plan. As I mentioned way earlier on, cell phones are probably some of the least secure things, and there's a number of laws in place where cell phone communication cannot be created to be secure or private. This is where you have to be a bit more careful about how you use your phone. So starting with the phone plan, most phone providers immediately, once you sign up for their plan, are going to track and sell all of your information. That said, there are a couple phone providers that don't do this, that say your privacy is what you do is up to you. We don't care what it is that you do. Probably the best US phone provider for this, note this is all US, I don't know abroad, is Mint Mobile. They have great programs. They have great, if you want to get a Mint Mobile SIM card, you can walk into almost any store. You can buy a unlimited SIM card with cash and pop into your phone so long as it's an unlocked phone, and bam. You don't have to hand over any information. You don't have to like sign up for anything in particular. You can do everything from just walking into a Best Buy with cash in hand, walking in with a totally new phone number with no one knowing what it is that you have. So that's one option. You can also use a program called MySudo for multiple, it's called VoIP numbers or Voice over Internet Protocol numbers. You can create a bunch of VoIP numbers all together all at once, which can be good for aliasing or using it to break apart to say, I'm going to use this phone number for work, going to use this phone number for personal use, this phone number for signing up for accounts and stuff like that. Finally, another option for if you want to just get an extra phone number is Google Voice, which you may say, hey Orion, why are you recommending a Google thing if you've said Google is probably the worst for privacy and security? Well, the thing is, phone numbers are already inherently not secure. As I mentioned before, there's laws around this so that they cannot make phone numbers secure. So generally, just avoid using a phone number in general for your communication. I'll get into communication alternatives in a moment. But in general, Google Voice is just a good way to get an extra phone number for a couple other things to split apart your life from. Instead of giving everyone your one main phone number, you can have two phone numbers to give one phone number for personal use and one phone number for business use or something like that. Next, going on to web surfing. It's just basically going to be the same thing as with your desktop. I'd recommend using the same browsers, recommend using the same search engines, recommend all the same things. Just Brave browser, Mullvad browser, use Brave search, DuckDuckGo, search, StartPage, all that stuff. It's basically the same thing. For communication, instead of using text or a phone call or Facebook Messenger or all of that, once again, the gold standard I would recommend is Signal. It is recommended by basically every privacy and security advocate, and for good reason, because it is the go-to private, secure, encrypted. Only you and the person you're messaging knows what it is that you're talking about. So there we go. Signal for sure. The one downside of Signal is that you have to have a phone number to sign up for it, but it's also an upside so that Signal can essentially prevent people from creating tons and tons and tons of accounts on there. So that's the reason they do it that way. So yeah, you do need a phone number to use it, but at the same time, you're not giving any information to anyone outside of what you're messaging. So yeah. Finally, if you do plan on using your phone as a standard phone for messages and phone calls, for Android at least, you can get different phone apps, is an interesting way to put it, where you can get something called Fossify Messages and Fossify Phone. And FOSS, in this case, FOSS, stands for free and open source software. So free and open source software, IFI Messages, Fossify Phone, where these are free, open source, meaning that anyone can look at the code. So you have a bunch of people constantly checking the code to make sure it's secure, you aren't being tracked on things, that bugs are fixed quickly, all that stuff. It also means that your phone manufacturer isn't spying on you through their software that they put on the phone to begin with. Finally, one last thing I'll mention for communication is an email client for your phone. Thunderbird is a great place to organize all of your emails on your desktop. A similar one for your phone is called a K9 email client, where it's just the letter K, the number 9, email client. So yeah, it's a good way to organize all of your emails in one place. Finally, moving on to the other section again for your phone. This is going to have a few interesting different ones that weren't mentioned in the main computer section because I know people use their phones differently from their main desktop or laptop. First off is app stores. To replace the Google Play Store, you can actually get something called F-Droid, which has a bunch of free open source software, which has many alternatives from your main apps or main Google apps, main other apps that you'll have on your phone that can be full of tracking that you don't want to give your information over to. But if you do need to get a Google Play Store app, but you don't want to go through the Google Play Store, another alternative is something called the Aurora Store, which can essentially anonymize everyone who uses it. So if you're downloading an app, Google doesn't know who's downloading it, but it'll still end up on your phone. So yeah, that's a great tool. Love it. It works well for me. For the Apple App Store, I'm not so sure about how that works there. I haven't used Apple for a long time, but I do know that you can do something called side loading, where you can side load certain apps so you don't have to go through the Apple App Store for certain things. Next is Google Maps. Oh boy, Google Maps is probably one of the worst offenders when it comes to your location, privacy, and whatever. For Google Maps, there are two main alternatives I would recommend. One that I use is called Organic Maps, and another one that I recommend is OpenStreetMaps, where maybe they aren't as up to date as Google Maps, but you can get to most places pretty quickly. And from what I've seen, I get pretty similar results from between Google Maps, Organic Maps, and OpenStreetMaps. And sometimes I'll actually get some better results from Organic Maps or OpenStreetMaps compared to Google Maps. Sometimes Google Maps will give me better results. It'll vary from place to place to place, but generally I prefer using Organic Maps or OpenStreetMaps because they don't track my information, they don't sell it to anyone, all of that. For phone two-factor authentication, some accounts will ask you if you want to have two-factor authentication where you may log in and they have to send something to your phone, which, yes, turn that on whenever possible. I would recommend using, it's a app called Aegis, Aegis. It's considered the gold standard of privacy and security when it comes to phone two-factor authentication. But even better is a hardware key, which is something that you have to plug into your computer and that will track to say, okay, you plugged in the hardware key, I approve of you logging into this site. So if someone gets access to your phone, that they can't get access to all of your accounts. Instead, they would have to get access to your hardware key instead. For that, I would recommend either a Flipper Zero, which is a fun hacking device that I wished that I had my hands on, but cannot get my hands on quite yet. Or the gold standard for this is YubiKey, YUBI key. So yeah, overall, there's a number of two-factor authentication ways to essentially lock up your accounts to be a little bit tighter. These two things are the main ones I'd recommend. For note-taking, don't use Apple Notes, don't use whatever Samsung Notes or whatever Google Notes that you are automatically given on your phone. Use something like Joplin. This is, again, free open source software that is designed to keep your information just for you. No one knows what you're writing. No one has access to whatever it is that you're writing. It's just locally on your device. So, yeah. Finally, for entertainment. This has been a long series, but getting to the end of it with entertainment. For YouTube, I recommend switching to NewPipe. This is more open on Android, where it's essentially a YouTube front end, where you can get access to all the YouTube library, but you don't have to deal with ads, you don't have to deal with YouTube tracking and trying to push certain things onto you. It's great. For Spotify, I use VI Music. It's an app that I downloaded from the App Store on Android, and it's very similar to NewPipe as it is to YouTube. I don't have ads, I don't have to deal with any of that. For podcast apps, I recommend AntennaPod. Finally, for replacing Audible for audiobooks, I recommend LibriVox, Chirp, or Libby. All of these have been great tools for me to live a more private, secure, anonymous lifestyle online, and has given me a much improved quality of life in many ways. So I want to end this off with some general online principles of things that we can do to in general, protect ourselves online, to keep our data more for ourselves, and still have a great experience. So, what are my general principles? If it has a camera or a microphone, assume it's watching, listening, because it probably is or probably can be. Limit the number of apps on your phone. Limit the permissions you give to the apps on your phone, and limit what you put online. Use multiple emails to create a couple aliases, so everything isn't tied to one or two emails/phone numbers. Have some general mindfulness. If you're going to use certain tools, programs, and software, be aware of the privacy implications of it. For example, social media is generally terrible for privacy and security. That said, you can make these accounts a little more private by being more thoughtful about what you're posting and how you set up your account. Use what you have to. For some people, they need social media for work, or they need a specific privacy-invasive software for certain things. Do your best to compartmentalize it so it's not impacting the rest of your life. Most FOSS software is a suitable alternative for mainstream programs, and sometimes it's better to use FOSS programs. For example, Maya used to be the gold standard in 3D animation and 3D modeling. Now Blender, a free and open source software tool, is considered the go-to even in industry. That said, sometimes you can't switch over. You have to use the mainstream tool that maybe isn't the best for you. Oh well, just use what you have to. Next, look for tools to help anonymize you with those around you. No, that doesn't mean use the programs that everyone else uses. There's a number of tools that can help you stay anonymous online. Just do some research on it. It's up to you to fight for your privacy. Choose tools that don't track or limit how they track you. write your politicians and ask them to fight for you. Really, it is up to you. For more, I'll include some aggregate sites to help you find the tools that are more private and secure and often cheaper to replace the ones that you currently use. And I'll leave all of my list of all the tools that I recommend here in the description below. So, how do you start? One step at a time. I know this has been a lot. I've definitely word vomited all over you of so many tools, so many things. You're like, this is too much. Don't worry. Take a step back. Just start one step at a time. The goal is to improve your quality of life. Start with what's easiest, try it out, and work your way up. There are very few things I personally care about, and while I'm far from perfect when it comes to online privacy, security, and anonymity, for example, I have social media. I use it for the sake of the podcast. I use Facebook Messenger because it's what my family uses, although I wish we didn't. I wish we would use Signal or something like that. And a couple other things. It's something that I believe people need to fight for. The innocuous comments you make today could be the very comments used to punish you down the line. In summary, we live in a world where your data is being harvested, bought, and sold constantly by big corporations, world governments, data brokers, and much more. Many of the devices we use collect more data than you realize, which can have major detrimental effects on personal freedom, psychology, and other areas of your life. Some may say that privacy is dead, that this mass surveillance is for your own good, and there is no point in trying to be more private and secure online. But you know better. We can fight back, and by removing our data from the internet, by being more mindful of the tools, software, and programs that we use day to day. What do you think? Is privacy dead? What did I miss? There was a lot covered in this episode, and there was so much more that I felt that I had to cut out, and even so I felt rushed doing this. So, share your thoughts, share your experiences, share your recommended apps in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode, then please share it with a friend you think would like it, or share it on social media. It would absolutely mean the world to me, and it helps the podcast grow so much. With all that said, thanks for listening. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later. Ciao.